So what we're going to try to do tonight, Siyat L'Shmai, we're going to try to talk about different types of visualizations. And we're going to see that there's actually three types and what's the objective of them. But there are basically three types of visualizations. One we'll call creative, one is imagery, and one is awareness. And these are just random words, but we'll just explain what they mean. The first one is creative visualization, which means that you are creating in your mind's eye a certain visualization for a certain purpose. So you have a certain purpose and you create a certain imagery on your own. You use your own power of imagination, and we'll see soon how this works, to create a particular image. The second form of these types of visualizations is that you actually use already an image that exists in existence. You're using an image, you're actually looking at an object, and you're using that as a focal point, as a stepping point for the meditation. Maybe we can bring some more chairs in the back or something. Okay. And the third one is awareness meditation, which the idea is that you're not actually creating this visual, but the visual actually exists already. And what you're doing, you're being creative using that visual. It's an awareness meditation. I'll give you the most simple example of that is that when you close your eyes, most people see a screen of different colors. So you use those colors, and you'll see soon there are different practices of what you do with the colors and how you observe them, what the colors represent, and if you can create imagery from that. So this is what we're going to try to do. We're going to try to at least get through some of the classic understandings of creative visualizations. Okay. Before we get into this, we also have to explain something very important, which is that there's a basic tension in our own existence between things that occur to us on a subliminal and a superconscious level versus things that occur to us on a conscious level. So, for example, let's say a person is struggling with their own self-esteem, and they read a good book about how you're supposed to have a healthy self-esteem, and they understand it makes perfect sense logically, and it doesn't help. The information they know, and they can explain to you exactly why it's healthy to have a healthy self-esteem, but it doesn't really work. Or I'll give you a more simple example. A person is struggling with anger, and they went to a few anger management sessions, and they read the book on anger. They know that to flare up in anger is the wrong thing to do, and yet, when they're faced with a certain challenge, the first response is anger. And the reason why this is this dichotomy is basically because there are two parts of ourself. There's one is the conscious being that we recognize, and we'll say that's me and you that we're having this conversation. And that conscious self makes choices. But most times our choices, especially when they're coming in a reactive place, is not coming from our conscious self. We're not choosing to be angry. We're not choosing to be angry. There's certain mindsets that are deeply ingrained into our superconscious, in our subconscious, in the subterranean levels of self. And because of that, we react in certain ways. And all that goes on a deeper level is something that we have to learn how to master it, or somehow to harness it in a positive way, that our instincts, so we're not trying to only change the superficial self, which is on the level of action. So I say you do this or you don't do this, but how do you train yourself in a way that your instincts become different? That if you're struggling with self-esteem, that your instincts, your natural instincts is to have a healthy self-esteem, and your natural instincts is to be still and not flare up in anger. So how do we get to that deeper level of your subconscious? So basically, there are different paths, but we're going to use imagery as one example. There's a continuous tension and dichotomy between what we necessarily understand and what we observe, and not observe on a conscious level, but on a subliminal level. So let's say we're bombarded with certain imagery. Let's say you're seeing the news, or you're walking down the street, and you're affected by these certain imagery, and you're not even conscious that you're taking in this information. And then later a certain situation comes up, you'll react based on the imagery that already was affected, what you experienced much before, or let's say, an image of self. Let's say you're a kid and your parents had, I don't want to blame your parents, but let's say your parents had a bad image of who you were, and they constantly told you that you're good for nothing, and you actually believed yourself to be good for nothing. Slowly that image of self is who you think you are, and then when you're an adult, sometimes this comes out, and therefore it shows up as an unhealthy self-esteem. So one of the paths to undo this is to use positive imagery. Now the value of positive imagery is twofold. I'm sorry for just getting straight into the topic. I didn't tell you a few jokes and a few things. So it's a lot to talk about. I don't even know if we're going to have enough time to get through these pages. So pretend that I told you all the jokes and the stories and everything. That's the joke. Okay. So let's move forward. So the idea is that we're going to try to figure out a way how to get to the deeper parts of ourself. And one of the paths is going to be through using imagery. Now, there's something very important to understand, that there's a difference between, let's say a person has a negative image, and they supplement it with a positive image. So the effect is actually twofold. First of all, if the image of, let's say we're talking about the image of yourself, is that you view yourself in a negative way, and you supplement and you exchange that image with a different image, two things happen. First of all, the mere fact that you're exchanging one image for another image is already healthy, because the image that you're exchanging for is a chosen image. You choose that particular image. The other point is that if you choose something positive, then you're creating positive imagery in the place of the negative. So that's the mere fact that you're choosing to think a particular thought is already a healthy thing. Okay, what's also very important to understand is that when we think of imagery, using imagery, most people think that this is fantasy. So let's say I tell you, okay, close your eyes, imagine yourself sitting in Aruba on a beach. And you say, okay, but I'm not in Aruba, I'm not on a beach, so what does it do? Okay, so we have to understand something also important, which is going to be the difference between fantasy and imagination. And I'll explain you this at a Kabbalistic level, but it's very important to understand the difference. So in the teachings of the Arizal, of Isaac Luria, he talks about 4 levels of self. That there are 4 levels of the body, which corresponds and are going to correspond to the 4 letters in the name of God, the Yud, the Hey, and the Vav, and the Hey. They also correspond to the 4 levels of soul, and to the 4 elements, and the 4 worlds. But there's a lot of different 4s. But one of this focus on the 4 parts of the body. The 4 parts of the body is one more external than the next. So the first level is Atzamos, which is called, it's actually quoted over here. The Atzamos is considered your bones. Above that is your sinews, which is your Gidim, like your veins. Above that is your Basar, which is your flesh. And above that, the most external is your Or, which is your skin. Okay? So you have these 4 levels of your body. So the most external level is your skin. You go a little deeper is your flesh. Underneath the flesh is the sinews, is the veins and arteries, and then underneath that is the bones. Of course, there's something beyond that, which is the marrow of the bones, which is Yechida, the highest level of the soul. But these are the four levels. These 4 levels correspond to 4 forms of intellect. So the basic human intellect is broken down into 2 compartments. And very simple, there's a difference between the right hemisphere of the brain and the left hemisphere of the brain. Okay, the basic difference between the structure of the right hemisphere and the brain and the left hemisphere of the brain is that the right part of the brain is creative. The way the right part of the brain thinks is in imagery. The left part of the brain is the opposite. The left part of the brain works through language, and the left part of the brain is what dissects and breaks apart ideas that are created in the right part of the brain. That's why if, God forbid, a person has a stroke on the right part of the brain, or if they have a stroke on the left part of the brain, they lose language, and if they have a stroke, God forbid, in the right part of the brain, they lose their sense of imagery or of complete structures of sentences, of understanding complete structures of sentences. These two parts of the brain, Kabbalistically, are called Chachma and Bina. So Chachma is the right part of the brain. Chachma means Koachma, the potential of what, which is the creative part. And Bina is what breaks it down into finer detail. Chachma is the right part, and Bina is, Eden, maybe take down the mechitza and put some chairs afterwards. Otherwise it's becoming complicated. And so Chachma is the right part of the brain, and Bina is the left part of the brain. Highly accomplished intellectual people don't necessarily have a bigger right part or left part of the brain. What they actually have is that the neurons that connect the right part of the brain and left part of the brain is much stronger than an average person. Let's say, for example, when they dissected Einstein's brain, his brain is not bigger than the average man, but the neurons that connect the right part of the brain and the left part of the brain is stronger. And it's a very simple reason, because if you have a very creative idea, maybe you came up with a theory of relativity, maybe you did, but you just don't know how to implement it. You don't know how to write it down in a sentence. And a lot of people have very brilliant ideas, but they can't speak about it. They can't articulate it. A lot of people are very good at articulating ideas, but they don't have no ideas. So it's an unusual genius that someone that has a very highly developed right part of the brain and a very highly developed left part of the brain, but most importantly, they have the connection between the right and left part of the brain. That connection between the left and right part of the brain, which also is connected with the frontal lobes, is the moyach hadas, is the intelligence of dat. And that is what connects the right and left part of the brain. You have a creative idea, you understand it, and then you bring it down, you implement it. Okay? So these are the three parts of intelligence. You're following? So you have the creative right part, which is chachma, and the left part, which is bina, which is understanding. And then you have dat, or das, which is the ability to connect these two and to come to a resolution. Some people call the frontal lobes of the brain the executive mind. Why is it the executive mind? Because that's the part of the brain that makes choices. We'll take questions afterwards, otherwise we're not going to end. So that is the three parts of the brain. There's an additional part of the brain, of the capacity of the human intelligence, which is the koyach hadimin, the potential of imagination. So these four parts of intelligence, which is chachma, bina, das, and dimyon, okay, which is creativity, or wisdom, understanding, knowledge, and imagination, correspond to the four parts of the body. So you have the atzamos, which is the inner part of the body, which you say is the bones, corresponds to the moyach hachachma, to the mind of intellect, of creativity, of wisdom. And the gidim, the second part, which is the sinews, correspond to bina. The third part, which is basar, which is meat, corresponds to dat. And the fourth part, which is or skin, corresponds to dimyon. Okay, so now we have to understand what the difference is. If a person has a dimyon, a person is, let's say, has an assessment of their life, and they want to imagine something completely different in their lives. So they read a manual about creative visualizations, and they imagine themselves in a completely different life, in a completely different reality. There's going to be a difference between when that's a healthy and productive and constructive form of visualization and when that's mere fantasy. If what you're thinking about, if what a person thinks about is, if the skin is on the flesh, which is on the sinews, which is on the bone, which means when it's a reflection from the internal to the external, then it's healthy imagination. But when it comes from the outside in, it's an unhealthy imagination, and that's fantasy. So the difference between a positive visual or a positive imagination versus something that's mere fantasy is whether it's from the inside out or from the outside in. So if you're walking down the street and you see a billboard that's advertising happiness, and the happiness involves usually certain imagery, which we don't know to talk about. But, whatever a beer commercial has. and you think this is the epiphany of this is what happiness is, who created that image for you? You didn't create the image, right? The image was externally imposed upon you. And then you think about yourself and you say, how come my life is not happy? Because I don't have anything that exists in the beer commercial. So who chose the thought? Who chose the visual? It was chosen for you. It was externally imposed, which means that it came from the outside in. Then it's actually only skin deep. Right? What does it mean it's skin deep? Because there's no flesh behind it, and there's no sinews, and there's no meat behind it. But if it works in the other direction, which means you have a good intuition of what you want your life to look like, and you also understand the capabilities of who you are. Okay, let's say if you're a 6'10", 400-pound sumo wrestler, you're not going to think you want to become a ballet dancer. Maybe it's not realistic, and maybe it is. Maybe I don't know. I'm just assuming. Probably it's not. But if you have a good understanding of who you are, what's your chachma? What does my intuition tell me who I should be? What is my bina? What do I understand myself to be? How do I can implement these things in my life? And then based on that, you have a certain understanding of what you want your life to be and how you want your life to be lived. And then you create this visualization, this imagination of what I can actually create. Then it's a healthy level of visualization, because then it's coming from chachma into bina, into das, into dimyon. Right? Then it's actually the skin that covers over the flesh, that covers over the meaty part of the body. But if it's the other way around, then it's only skin deep. It's only from the external projected into the eternal. Now this idea, we'll call fantasy or false imagination, is actually related to the first narrative in the Torah, where the Torah talks about the creation of Adam and Eve. And I think the Torah talks about the creation. That's not a chumash. The Torah talks about the creation of Adam and Eve, and it talks about a snake. Right? You're familiar with the story. There's a snake in the Garden of Eden that tempts Eve to eat, Chava to eat from the garden, from the tree of knowledge. Now the snake, the way the Torah describes the snake is Vanachash haya arum, that the snake was arum. Arum literally means naked, and it also means sly. So this sly nakedness, what is the sly nakedness? The snake represents a consciousness of fantasy. Because what does the snake tell Adam and Eve? It says that the day that you eat from the tree of knowledge, you become all powerful. And that's the reason why Hashem told you not to eat from the tree, because Hashem doesn't want you to become powerful. So the snake represents, by definition, because it's a snake, and it's outside, the voice that Adam and Eve listen to is not their internal voice. Their internal voice says, do not eat from the tree of knowledge. But they hear an external voice that tempts them with these grandiose visions of who they will become if they eat from the tree of knowledge. That is an externally imposed fantasy. And that's why the nachash is arm. So the way the Torah describes it is the nachash's arm is that the nachash only has skin. Right? And this is what actually happens to Adam and Eve, that their skin becomes damaged. Their skin, before they were undressed, and if you're familiar a little bit with the story, before they're walking around with no clothes. And when I say they, I don't mean they, people that lived many years back. It actually means us. These are archetypes of who we are, that we are in the Garden of Eden, and we are Adam and Eve, that are continuously choosing whether we choose the tree of life or the tree of knowledge. These are choices that we're making in every moment. But when we choose to eat from the tree of knowledge, listen to the external voice, the voice of the culture around us that says this is the definition of happiness, not because we understand it, but that's what you say, so I'm assuming that's going to be true. That brings us to the damaging of our skin. Our skin becomes damaged. And how does that reflect that the skin become damaged? Is that the skin of Adam and Eve, which originally was the Ketona, was light, was revealing, now becomes concealing, and now they have to put a garment upon their skin. Before, the skin itself was the garment of the flesh, right? Because that's what it was. It was covering the flesh. That was covering the sinews. It was covering the bones. You're following this narrative? Mm-hmm. So the actual skin was itself, the levush was itself the garment that they were wearing. They didn't need an external garment. The garment was created within themselves. Once they listened to an external voice, they projected outward. They needed actually an external garment to cover over their own skin. And that's why we say that the snake, what is the reflection of the snake? The snake actually has to shed its skin. This is the snake. This is the klipa. That's the level of skin. Contrast that to another narrative in the story of the Garden of Eden. Is this. This is a very important story. Where Adam and Eve are created. Okay. By the way, we're on the left column where it says sources. So maybe we should just go through very quickly. So the snake sheds skin, causes damage of Adam's skin, which is the skin of light, to become the skin of the blind. So instead of an aleph, which is or, which is light, it becomes or with an eye, which is iver, which is it's blind. And the demon is the skin, which is the fourth level of intellect. So the four levels is deep, is the bones, which is chachma, which is wisdom, sinew, which is bina, is understanding, flesh, which is das, which is awareness, and skin is demon, is imagination. If you don't have if it's not clear to you, you can ask questions soon. But this is the basic structure. I just want to make sure you understand what we're trying to do. We're trying to understand is what is really a positive imagery. When I close my eyes and I want to create myself a new reality for myself, am I just having fantasies and it's not going to have any effect, or am I actually creating positive imagery that actually will have an effect on me? So we have to make sure that we understand what we're doing. If we're just playing games with fantasy, and then it's just another fantasy, or we're actually creating something that's real. And again, we have to know if it's skin that's covering over the flesh, that's covering over the bones, that's covering over the sinews. Let me give you maybe a more simple example from this in the story of the creation of Adam and Eve. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the story, but let me just go very quickly what happens in the story, the creation of Adam and Eve. And again, we're going to understand that the creation of Adam and Eve is actually our creation, our story. So in the narrative, there's a difference between chapter 1 and chapter 2 in the creation story. In chapter 1 of the creation story, the Creator creates Zachar v'Nekeva bara otam, male and female created them. And he created this being of male and female. He created them b'tzalmenu kudmutenu, created in the divine image and in divine likeness. Okay, so this creation of Adam and Eve in the first story of creation is one being. What does it mean that it's one being? And it's actually, we call it Adam, which we'll assume is male, but it's not a male. The best way to imagine this is a being that has one side male and one side female. Okay, obviously, this is not on a literal sense, but this is what this being represents. Someone that includes both male and female. That's the first story in the Torah. The Torah actually says that, right? Zachar v'Nekeva bara otam, male and female, he created them. Then there's chapter 2 narrative in Genesis, which seems to contradict the first story. In chapter 1, Adam and Eve are created simultaneously. Zachar v'Nekeva bara otam. In chapter 2 narrative, there's actually there's a process, which is that Vayipol Hashem Elokim Tardeim al Adam, that Hashem Elokim puts a great slumber upon this man, Adam, and he goes to sleep, and Vayishan, and he's sleeping, Vayikach Achad P'Solosav, and he takes one of his sides, and he creates Eve. You're familiar with the story? So where is Eve created from? Adam. But we just said before that Adam is not a male. That Adam is actually male and female. Right? So we have to really understand what the story is. We just said that in chapter 1, Adam and Eve are created simultaneously. In chapter 2, Adam goes to sleep and Eve is created from the side. If we understand the stories as sequence, it means like this. When we say that Adam and Eve are created, in the first story, they're created through b'tzalmenu kudmusenu. So the root word of tzalmenu kudmusenu, which is image and likeness, is tzel and dmut. Now, dmut is from the word dimyon, which is the word that we're using, which is the word imagination. And tzel comes from the word shadow. So man, male and female, are created through the divine imagination, through the divine shadow. We are created with the divine in the divine imagination. The best way to think about it is that God dreams us up into existence. And that's very important to understand this, because now let's go to the second story. What happens in the second story? The second story is that it says, Loi tov v'yos adam levad. It's not good for man to be alone. We're going to make him a helper against him. When it says it's not good for man to be alone, who is this man? He's not alone. We just said that male and female, he created them. What does it mean that it's not good for man to be alone? It means that it's not good for man to be alone, back-to-back relationship. There's something that's called an achar ba'achar relationship, a back-to-back relationship. A back-to-back relationship is, incidentally, a lot of people have this throughout their entire lives. But usually it's children have this relationship with their parents. When you're 5 years old, and your parents decide, okay, we're getting up now and we're going to drive somewhere. You may have an opinion, but they're not necessarily going to listen to you. Because if your parents say, this is what you have to do, you're attached to their hip. Which means wherever they go, you go. If you're a little kid, let's give a better analogy. You're a little kid, and you're 3 years old, and your father gets another job in another city, you're moving. You're not saying, well, I really like living here. I'm sure you do, but you have to move. This is a relationship that people have, and people have this with other people as well, which is a back-to-back relationship. Back-to-back relationship means that they're both attached to the hip, and wherever one moves, the other one moves along. That's not a healthy relationship, because you never have an encounter between one person and another. So a child has a relationship with his parents as a back-to-back relationship. It's continuous. It's always present. Right? It's a zivuk tmidi. It's always present. There's never a separation. The child lives in the parent's home. But it's not a real relationship. A real relationship is when two people are facing each other face to face. Face to face means that each one can move in the other direction, but they're choosing to stand face to face. That's a healthy encounter between two people. Now let's go back to the story in Genesis and Bereshis. In the beginning of the story, it says that Adam and Eve are created as one. It means that all our relationships begin as one. We're back to back. All our relationships begin in a back-to-back relationship because we're children, and our relationship with our parents is back to back. At some point, you rebel against your parents. I don't know, big rebellion, small rebellion, but some type of rebellion, you rebel, and you all of a sudden, instead of standing back to back to your parent, all of a sudden you stand face to face and say, no, I don't want to do that. Right? And that's the first time your parents are really shocked. How could you tell me no? And I'm your parents and I fed you and I didn't stress you for so many years. But that's the first time someone's standing face to face. That's actually a good relationship. When you have a relationship with another person, another human being, and you can actually face them face to face, that's healthy. Because then when they're standing in front of you, they're choosing to be in front of you. And you're choosing to be in front of them. So the second narrative, the second story of Bereshis, is where they're now going to stand, instead of back to back, they're going to be standing back to back, they're going to be standing facing each other. Right? A's are connected, they're going to be a helper against them, they're standing one against the next. But in order to create that, this is what the Torah says. God says, I created you through my imagination. You want to create somebody else? Use your imagination. Who creates who in the second narrative? It's not only Adam creating Eve, but Adam and Eve, remember, because they're one. So Eve is also Adam, right? Adam and Eve is both male and female. So who creates who in their imagination? They each create the other. So when it says that Hashem Elokim put Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava, because it's male and female, he put them to sleep. What does that mean he put them to sleep? He put them into a dream state. What is tardema? The root of the word tardema is dimion, is imagination, like the word kidmusenu. What is the word salotav? What is the root words of the word salotav, which is side, is tzel, is bitzalmenu, is shadow. So Hashem is saying, telling Adam and Eve, you want to have a relationship with another? If you really want to have a relationship with another, to stand face to face with the other person, you have to create in your imagination the other person first. Some people say, it's very hard for me to find the shidduch. It's very hard for me to find the right person. I'm looking. Listen, I have a lot of sympathy for that. But I'm just saying, part of the problem is that you first have to create the possibility, really create the space for the possibility for another person to be. If it means going to sleep and imagining of the possibility of living your life with another person, that will open you up the possibility to find the other person. So long as you, in your imagination and your dreams, you're always dreaming of yourself as an individual person, that's the reality that you're going to have. And if you're going to have a relationship with another person, it's going to be back to back, which is an I and it relationship, or whatever you want to call it. If you really want to have an I and thou, a really deep relationship with another person, you have to go to that, to create bitardema mitzaloisav. You have to go to create through the dimyon, through the tzel. You have to go through that same process of creating. And this is all creativity. Anytime we want to create something else, we have to go into that place and first create the possibility for that other thing. We can't bring something into our life if we don't create the space first in our life. If we can't imagine the possibility of that space before it's created. We just read in the Zohar a few weeks ago a similar idea. We didn't write here, but the Zohar says, Isha ketazriya v'yolda zachar. The Torah speaks about a woman that becomes pregnant, conceives, and gives birth. But the problem with this verse is that it says Isha ketazriya, which means a woman that conceives, v'yolda, and gives birth. But it never says, and she becomes pregnant. It should say Isha ketazriya, a woman that conceives, v'hara, and she becomes pregnant. V'yolda, and then she gives birth. What does it mean, Isha ketzazir, v'yolda, that a woman conceives and gives birth? So the Zohar said that this type of birth is the birth before the actual pregnancy. A woman conceives, gives birth to the possibility that she's going to have a child, then she conceives, becomes pregnant, and has a child. This is the mega narrative, or the meta narrative. This is the narrative before. In order for you to conceive, and this is we're talking about a practical thing, but it's anything in life. If you want to conceive and birth a new idea in your life, you first have to birth the idea in your imagination, and then you can actually birth it in actuality, right? And this is the power of your thought. Your thought creates the possibility. You create the space within yourself, in your imagination, the possibility of that other, or that birthing of that new, whatever you wish to create for the new, and then you can actually go ahead and create it. You conceive, you give birth, and then you conceive and become pregnant with the idea and give birth. And this is the process of creation. So all forms of creation, that's what the Torah is saying. It's created in dream. He goes to sleep. Adam has to go to sleep. It's literal not, but it means that he's going to sleep. It's created through his tardema and his dimyon and his tzalosav and his tzel and his imagination and his shadow. It's created, the other is created in that state. And this is going to be, we have to make sure, this is going to be when we're talking about a healthy creation of a new reality is when it comes from the inside, right? That you create it based on a proper assessment of who you are. You have a good understanding of what your reality is, a good chachma, a good bina, a good da'at, and then your dimyon fills out and fleshes or whatever, becomes the skin of that idea. And then it's healthy, and then that skin is light. This is what we have to achieve, if anything, if we ever want to achieve something. And this is the importance of this idea. But to create this idea, when we talk about creating this idea in the mind, I'm going to say there's another two important ingredients here. First of all, detail. It's very important to have actually as much detail as possible. Okay? I don't want to get, there's a lot of other parts of this whole story. We're trying to just focus on one thing. Of course, you need to pray and you have to there's other things, but we're just talking about just the visualization aspect. So one is the idea of detail. And the second thing is that if it's very hard for you to visualize, you want to say, okay, so I would like this thing to happen in my life, and I go into the ayin, and I pray, and I open myself up to the possibility, and I create this visualization, and this is what I understand through a proper assessment of who I am. This is the skin that's on top of the flesh, on top of the sinews. This is what I want to create for myself. So you have a lot of detail, and there's another very important part. You close your eyes, you try to visualize this, and it doesn't come. Okay, so that's very important to understand. When we talk about visualization, even though most times we're actually talking about a real visual, visualization doesn't necessarily mean only a visual. We have other senses. So if something doesn't come to our head, something doesn't come to our mind on a visual level, it can come to us on a sensory level, or through hearing, through smelling. You smell the new reality for yourself. You hear about the new reality for yourself. You're following? You have to actually join all your capabilities, because sometimes you're gonna try to create it and all you see is a blank screen. And you say, okay, I'm trying to create this visualization. I'm trying to create something for something. Nothing's really happening. So try to use your other capacities and whatever it is to bring it into the practice. Okay, that's that. Now what we're going to try to do is okay. Before we get into this, which is visualization meditation number 1. So this is going to be a classic form of visualization, and then we're going to actually do the practice. I want to understand what this practice is. But I think what I want to do now is do a very simple visualization. Okay? So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to guide you. It's going to be a very simple meditation. I just wanted to give you a little bit of taste, and then we'll try to go a little deeper. Before you do this visualization, I'm going to guide you step by step, so you're going to have to close your eyes. You're going to have to trust that no one's going to bother you. And we want to do something very simple. So think about something in your life that you're holding on to, something heavy, something that you would like to let go of. I'm going to do a very simple guided meditation through this practice, and then we'll continue with this next visual. Okay. So, if you can gently close your eyes for a moment and just relax. Just as you're sitting, just let go of any of the noise, any of the chaos. Just simply just relax, just be gentle. And you may notice different sounds and different bodily sensations, thoughts or feelings across your mind. As you're sensing everything, don't try to manipulate it, just let it go. Take a deep exhale. Focus on the breath leaving your body, pushing itself out of your body. Now visualize yourself standing in front of a large wall. It stretches all the way up in both directions, as far as you can see, horizontally and vertically. You're very close to this wall and there's nothing to go, there's nowhere to go. But you notice that underneath, at the bottom of the wall, there's a small little door. You have to crouch down to open the door. And you open the door. And you're squeezing through this passageway. And as you're squeezing yourself through the door, everything that you wish to let go and is attached is shedding. And you're letting go of things physically and emotionally. You push yourself out through this door. You enter into a new space. It's very expansive, open. There's a lot of light. You feel completely refreshed and renewed. Imagine yourself wearing different clothes, hearing your new name or name being called. You feel completely renewed, open and full of possibility. Everything before is left behind. Just take everything in. Now turn back around. You're facing the wall again. And now you open the door again, and now you could slide through the passageway. Now you feel lighter and transformed, refreshed and renewed. You're back into your old life, but with a fresh perspective and a renewal. Take a deep inhale. And open your eyes. Okay. You're able to do that? All right, that's good. Let's move on. It's deathly quiet, so I'm not sure why. Everything's okay? Just make sure everyone's alive. Okay, we're gonna try to do a few actual practices. I don't know if we'll have time for a few of them, but just at least one or two. The first one is going to be about, it's a practice that's done during prayer, but it's also, we'll see soon that it's actually relevant always. So this idea that when a person prays, especially when you pray the Amidah, you should face in the direction of the temple in Jerusalem, into the temple, into the Holy of Holies. Now there's sources, classic Kabbalistic sources, which speak about that when a person wants to enter into a higher state, a deeper state of consciousness, so they should visualize themselves entering into the Holy of Holies in the temple, in the Beis Hamikdash. So for most people, this doesn't really mean anything. What does it mean to be in the Holy of Holies at the temple? So we're trying to make try to understand this a little bit. In the times of the temple, there were the structure of the temple had different rooms. So there was the Azar, then there was a Kodesh Kodashim. These were reflected in the three realities. You walk from the outer court into the Holy of Holies. Who walked into the Holy of Holies? The only person that walked into the Holy of Holies was the high priest. And the only time that the high priest walked into the Holy of Holies was on Yom Kippur, okay, which is the holiest day of the year. So on the holiest day of the year, we'll assume it's the holiest person in the world walks into the holiest place. So let's try to understand what this means. It means like this, that everything exists in an olam shana nefesh. Everything exists within time, space, and consciousness. Every reality that we have occurs in a particular time, exists within a particular space, and is observed by a particular consciousness. Right? Time, space, and consciousness are the basic three ingredients of this physical universe. Time, space, and consciousness are completely interlinked because time and space is completely dependent by consciousness, right? The observer affects the observed. This is basic quantum mechanics, and time and space are linked, which is basic theory of relativity, and so essentially there is no time without space, there is no space without time, and there's no time and space without consciousness. You're following? Okay. So when we talk about space, we'll say that the Holy of Holies is the holiest space. That's Holy of Holies. What does it mean it's the holiest space? It means that it's the root space of all space. That's the essential space from where all space comes from. What does that mean in our own life? Let's say a practical thing that it means in our life. Your Holy of Holies means a particular place in your life. I'm talking about a physical space even, that's completely sacred. Okay, what does it mean there's a particular space in your life that's completely sacred? It's like your miniature temple. Let's say, for example, you were a kid and you had a favorite room that you played with. Or when you were a kid, you have very fond memories of being at this amusement park, right? There's a certain place that if you close your eyes, you can think about a particular place in your life, and maybe you're an older person, maybe it's a beach, I don't know, whatever it is. There's a certain place that you think about, and you think in that place is my holiest of holy. And the reason why I say holy, because maybe it's not so holy, what I mean by holy is that it's whole, like with a W. Holy means that it's a place that you feel or you felt when you were in that place, you felt completely in touch with who you are, completely not judged, completely accepted, both accepted by others and accepted by yourself, and you felt completely whole. Okay, that's like a very deep place that you have in a memory of that particular place. The same thing also, there's a particular time. This particular time could be in your day-to-day life, it could be something that happened on Yom Kippur, it could be something that happened throughout the year, but there's a particular time that you felt that at this time, that was my truest moment. That was the time that I felt most connected with who I am as the deepest person, not only physically, but spiritually and mentally. I felt most connected to who I am and most accepting of who I was. When a person says, I'll give you like a roundabout example of this. The Torah, when it talks about the high priest entering into the Holy of Holies, it says, V'chol adam lo yeh, that there should be no man entering when the high priest enters into the Holy of Holies. So the Medrash and the sages ask, what does it mean that no man? But the high priest himself is a man. What does it mean no man? It says at that point, the priest who enters into the Holy of Holies is transformed and becomes an angel. Or like the Radina said, he loses his surah sadam, he loses his form of humanness. This is the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies is a place in your life where let's try to phrase it a little different. When you say no one's present, when you're present with when you're present with yourself, is there someone present with you? It's a very complicated question. But when you're sitting alone in a room, is there someone else in the room with you? And I would say that actually it really depends how you're feeling. If there's some level of inner dichotomy within yourself, then when you're sitting alone with yourself, there's somebody that's judging you. Okay, let's make this very practical. You ever sit alone in your house and there's a little voice that says, oh, what are you doing with yourself? You don't have to answer the question. If there's that voice that comes up and asks you that question, that means you're not alone with yourself beyond yourself. You're alone with yourself, but there's still a little critic that's observing you. When it says that the high priest enters into a place that he's alone with himself and there was no one else there, it means that there's no one else of himself there. He's so fully there that only he is there. Following? Mm-hmm. Okay, this is actually a space that exists within all of us. Maybe it's gonna be hard for you to find that space. So when the sages and the Talmud and different sages talk about a person should enter into the Amidah, enter into a high level of prayer, they should enter into a place where they're in the Holy of Holies as the high priest, as Yom Kippur. in very simple language, that means is when you want to really talk to God and you want to really pray deeply, which means you want to really say what you're really feeling. You want to talk about your true aspirations and your dreams and your hopes and your anxieties, and you really want to express yourself fully. You have to be fully in touch with yourself. You have to be in touch with yourself in such a way that you're just fully yourself. To enter that place, you have to imagine yourself being, now you are now the high priest. Not someone. You are now the high priest. So you're the highest person that's alive. You're the deepest person that's alive. And it's probably true. At this moment you probably are. And you're entering into the deepest, in your memory bank, you're entering into the deepest memory of a time that you were, who you were deeply, into a place that you were in a very deep place. And that's the way you're going to focus so you can actually express yourself in a full way. You're following? And this is a very powerful form of meditation, because what you're doing is you're trying to create for yourself, recreate for yourself through your power of your dimion, through your power of imagination, to recreate for yourself a time in your life or a place in your life or your consciousness during the time in that place where you felt completely whole and perfect and simultaneously imperfect and completely broken. But in that place, to really talk from that place. Okay? So we're going to try to do this as another meditation. Again, I'm going to guide you, but I can't get you to that place. I can just give you indicators of how to get there. But we're going to try to do this is a meditation. This is based on a lot of good sources. So we're going to try to do this again, and then we're going to talk about one other meditative practice. Let's do this for a few minutes. I just want to say before we do this that these are just samplings. These are not, I'm just giving you samples of examples of, we talk about 3 forms of visualization. This is all part of the creative ones, right? We didn't yet get to actually using imagery and actually using awareness. And Jeff, to what time do we have till we go to questions and answers?
9:15.
9:15. Oh, 9:15 till questions and answers?
It is.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So let's do this. If you can, again, gently close your eyes. Just stay focused on your body. Take a deep exhale. Try to recall from memory a certain image of yourself in a particular place during a particular time. It doesn't have to be in the far past. It can be even something that happened today or yesterday or a year ago. You were so with yourself, so alone with yourself that you weren't even aware that you were with yourself. There's no one to be aware. It's a very deep place within you. It's a very internal place. Try to bring back to memory that particular physical location that you're at. And that time that you're existing in. The consciousness that you had at that moment. And as you're present with that self, you recognize that's the real you. Feel yourself alone and not judged, just alone with the Creator, with Hashem. It's very peaceful, sense of transcendence. It's quiet, it's in the inner chamber. There's no distractions. The Medrash says that even angels don't enter. There's nothing there, it's very quiet. Very wholesome, very complete. This is who you are on a deep level. You strip away and you peel away all the externalities. And all the beingness and doingness and all the busyness. Perfect you like the day you were created. Hashem Shmasati to her, the pure soul that you were given to me, and its purity and wholeness. Sometimes to get to that place is like peeling an onion. It's painful and you tear up, but as you peel layer by layer, you get deeper and deeper. You peel away all the hurt and the resentment and anxieties. Your perfect soul. Take a deep exhale and open your eyes. Okay. We're going to move on to a very fundamental, such a deep place I forgot how to speak. A very fundamental practice, which is called, in Hebrew it's called Ispashtu Tagashmiut, or Ispashtus Tagashmius, divestment of the material. We're going to see how this practice works. We'll read a little inside because there's some quotes here. And we're going to see what this practice is. We'll see that it's a very fundamental practice. And the intention is to be able to let go of our material form and everything that it entails. So all the problems that we deal with in life is all because we are embodied. So a solution is let go of your body and let go of all your problems. Okay. But there's obviously a big problem here. Because if the intention is to let go of the body and all the problems, so then why do we have a body? And why do we have the problems? So we're going to see that there's actually three three levels of attachment that we have with the narrative of our life. Okay? So let's break it down very simply. Okay. You're an artist. That's who you are. This is what you do. You're an artist. And you take this very seriously, and rightfully so. This is, you may make a living, this is your artistic expression, this is what you want to do. And you have a showing. You're showing in a gallery, you're very excited, and your art is showing. You put on your fancy suit or your dress, and you come to the gallery, and you hear remarks of people. Like the first person says, what is this guy thinking about? And this guy is terrible. Yeah, this guy should get another job, or this woman should. So what happens? What do you feel? I'm just giving you an example of an artist, but every person has their own life. Everyone has a story, right? Everyone has a story. One person thinks they're very smart. One person thinks they're very good looking. One person thinks they're very funny. Right? Everyone has a story. This is a story that you have. You think, oh, but I'm very funny, or I'm very good at my job, or I'm a good friend to people. Whatever your story is, you follow. Everyone has a story, and everyone's connected to their story. And then someone tampers with your story. Someone pokes little holes into your story. And what's the reaction? The reaction is you get angry at them. What do you mean? What do you know about art? I mean, I'm an artist. You have no idea what do you understand about music? You don't understand anything. You're not a musician. Okay, so what? You understand what I'm saying? So the first reaction is your ego attachment to your narrative, whatever your narrative is, and because you have this strong attachment to your story. If your story is hurt or threatened or even presumed threatened or even, imaginary threatened, you right away go on the offensive. Correct? Okay. Now this leads to a lot of problems because a lot of times these things are just actually, the person didn't really mean it, and the person didn't say hello to you. They just didn't see you on the street. They're not really angry at you. Do you understand what I'm talking about? We create certain narratives, and because we're trying to protect ourselves constantly, and we walk around this with a lot of grudges and a lot of issues. And this person doesn't look at me the right way, and this person thinks I'm this, and that person thinks I'm that. No one's really actually thinking about you. That's another problem. It'd be good if they're thinking about you, but we create all these narratives, and we walk around and we're a bundle of frustrations. Okay, so the first level of practice is because you're so attached to your ego and you're so attached to this narrative, and everything that comes along. This is all because of your body and your physical expression into this material world, how you're expressing yourself. So the first level is detach yourself. You detach yourself, but when you detach yourself, that's good. That's good because now. If you're an artist and someone comes along and says, by the way, your art stinks, so you're okay, fine, so what? It's okay. I love you anyways. It's fine. But the problem is that if you really live in a place that you're completely detached, over time you become completely insensitive and apathetic to everything. Because you're completely in a place of stillness and quietness and emptiness that you're really nothing matters anymore. In Hebrew, these words are called yesh and ayin. So yesh, existence, is where you're very much embodied in the story. And ayin is emptiness, where you empty yourself in the story and you're just ayin, you're nothing. So, or equanimity, ishtavut, whatever, all these levels, which is that you're really just in a place of complete equal setting and nothing really matters, but then you eventually become insensitive and apathetic. And that's not either the point. How do we know that's not the point? Because you're a body and you have emotions and you have expressions, and the fullness of yourself is to be fully who you are. Fully who you are is actually to embrace everything that you are. That's part of your yesh story, part of your narrative. So it's not about letting go of your narrative, because then you might as well not have been born. But if you're born to create music or create life and do whatever you have to do, then you have to create it. So again, the objective is to get to stage 3. So stage 1 is that you're completely tenaciously bound to your ego in a way that you walk around always feeling threatened. And there's always a you and me. You know, in this paradigm, there's always a you and me. Right? There's you. I'm not saying you and me. I'm sorry. There's always a you or me. There's always us and them. There's always one team against the next. It's okay. So if it's not me against you, then it's us against them, or it's us against the planet, or the planet against Mars. I don't know, something. But there's always friction. You're always battling something because there's always a threat, and you're always afraid. Okay, when's the next threat coming? This guy wants to steal my money. This guy wants to steal my friends, and this guy wants to take this and that and the other thing. So that's the yesh reality. Then you're going to practice. What we'll see soon is the divestment of the physical. So you completely let go. You let go. You become ayin, and you reach equanimity, and you're fine with everything. But then you become completely insensitive and completely not unambitious, because everything's the same. Okay, life, death, friends, no friends, money, no money, this, that. Everything's the same. So the higher level is to reach the third stage. The third stage is to reach a place of holy reattachment, or reattachment from a place of detachment. That you reach stage 3 through stage 1. That you reconnect, but through stage 2. The simple example that I give, because this is something that happens a lot in my own life. Not that I cook, if you know that I know how to cook. But my wife likes to cook. And imagine, okay, she spends a lot of time cooking this particular dish. She gets a lot of energy, and she spends a lot of time. To me, with food, I'm mishtavos. To me, it doesn't really matter. But, okay, whatever. The dish is sitting there. And then one of my kids come, and for no apparent reason, I'm sure there's some logic in this, take a bottle of water and just pour it over the steak. I don't know. Why? I don't know. Something. There's some reason for that. There's some logic. Now, if you're very much attached to this dish that was just created for you, you get really upset at the kid, and let's say it was an accident. Let's say it was a real accident. The kid was not thinking, and whatever, they spilled their water. So what is holy? What are the 3 levels over here? The first level is that I really want this food. I really love this food, and I'm really enjoying this food. And it's a mitzvah. You make a blessing, and it's all kedusha Torah. You make a blessing, and it's holy, right? And I love this food. Second level is that I don't care. You can feed me, cereal and milk, or you can feed me gourmet food. It doesn't matter to me. The third level is, no, I actually do enjoy this particular food. And maybe there's, we want to go spiritually. There's a connection between me and Rav Nachman talks about a person has connection between tastes. So you have your soul elevation comes to this particular taste. The Jerusalem Talmud says that eventually a person is going to give a judgment for every single food that they saw and didn't eat, because you have to make a blessing. Okay, so there's spiritual reason that I want this particular food, not over the other one. But then someone spills something on it, so I was going to enjoy it, and now I'm letting go. It's fine. You understand? So my relationship to this thing is that I would like to have it, but I'm not so bound to this that if it doesn't happen, like, my life is distraught. Like if you wake up in the morning and you don't have coffee, it's okay. It's okay. I understand. You want to have coffee in the morning. Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. Some people do. Some people don't. But let's say this is what your routine is. You wake up in the morning and after Maidani. Okay. So you said you want your coffee. Okay. There's no coffee. For some reason the kid pulled out the plug and there's no hot water. It's fine. It's fine. You understand? So this is the level of 3. But how do you get to that level? You have to first, the fundamental practice is you have to start by learning to be able to disassociate yourself, your awareness, your consciousness from your body. So we're going to read 3 teachings in translation. The first one is from Rav Chaim Vital. Rav Chaim Vital is the primary student of the Arizal. And this is not from the Ari. It's actually not even from himself. This is a collection that he put together from different Kabbalistic teachings. Rav Chaim Vital, we talked about Rav Chaim Vital on Shabbos. So this is Rav Chaim Vital also on the same track after he met the Ari, and he's adding different things. So he talks about different things, different practices. So let's just read. It's on the right column on the bottom. So Shar Kedusha is the gates of holiness. Reb Chaim Vital. The person, this is writing in the 1500s in Tzfat, Safed, Israel, or maybe over here already in Damascus. And a person himself needs to isolate his thoughts until it's extreme, and divest his body from his soul until he does not feel as if he's within the material at all. Rather, he's only spirit. So you have to completely learn how to divest yourself. We're going to talk soon what that means. And the more that he divests from the material, the more awareness will increase. And he senses the sound and movement that distracts his thoughts. And if he senses the sounds and movement that distracts his thoughts, or if he voluntarily brings up material under the thoughts, immediately a spiritual thought will cease to cleave to the above. Which means that all of a sudden you're trying to divest yourself, and all of a sudden you're starting to think about, what you had for breakfast. Boom, you're back down again. And he will not attain anything, because high holiness does not rest upon a man who cleaves to material, even the hair breadth. The point is that even though the person is inwardly worthy for the Holy Spirit, Ruach HaKodesh, to rest upon him, he is not accustomed himself to completely divest from the Spirit from his body. His Spirit will not rest upon him. Meaning he's saying that if a person even is worthy spiritually, you've worked on yourself, and you've come to some type of spiritual madrega, some spiritual level, if you don't know how to divest yourself from the material, you're not going to be able to do anything, because any small thought, you're back. It's like, the kid throws the water into the food, and all of a sudden you're back to being angry. And this is actually a very sadly a common practice with even people that have some type of spiritual experiences in life. The Baal Shem Tov actually talks about this also, that after prayer you have to make sure that you don't become angry at other people. And this seems to be a contradiction. What do you just prayed and you just had a deep experience? So what does it have to do with anger? Because if you're really honest, sometimes when a person has any type of experience that's a little outer worldly, something that's deeper, they become upset at small things, because how could you busy your life with such nonsense, right? I'm not saying that it's consciously, but all of a sudden you see something, you say, that's what you're really worried about, these silly things, and then you become angry at the other person. But the whole intention was that you should become a more compassionate person, an opener person. So there's a danger that if you reach some type of spiritual plateau and you haven't worked on yourself to divest yourself in a healthy way, that any small trigger that will trigger your attachment to the material will actually cause you to have a spiritual downfall. Are you following? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, so this is very important. So that's why it's important to actually learn how to practice this. We're going to do this as a meditation, but if you really attune to it, you can just snap into it in one moment, and then you get back into it. Okay, so then there's another source that he talks on the left column, again, the left column, the second, further on he writes, and he closes his eyes, the vessel material, imagining that his soul left the body, and he's floating above in the sky. Okay, and then he outlines a detailed meditative practice which involves repeating a particular text over and over again, and eventually entering a trance state of automatic speaking or a semi-state. And he writes that if you follow the outline of the practice and nothing happened, either because you're not worthy, because you haven't refined it, or because you were not able to properly divest yourself from the material. So even if you're going to do very deep spiritual practices, that if you don't know how to do this, nothing's going to work. Okay. Let's look at the right column. And the right column, the entire column is basically a quote from the Maggid of Mezrich and from the Baal Shem Tov. So this is in the beginning of the 1700s. Okay, I'm going to read it, and then we're going to try to make sense what this means. Okay, so a person has to go from level to level when he wants to rise upwards. And first, he needs to think about rising to the first level of Rakia, which is atmosphere or the sky cap or heaven, which the journey itself takes about 500 years. That's what the Talmud says in Chagig, but it doesn't mean this literally. And with this in mind, he should broaden the sky cap in all directions, so it does not appear narrow and small, rather expands in all directions. Okay, so he's entering into a meditative state, but he's not shrinking his focus, but it's expanding his focus. And he stands there. He needs to again think that he needs to rise even higher, then even higher. But he cannot rise instantaneously in one movement, reaching all seven heavens. Rather, he needs to move from one heaven to the next. When he comes to the first sky cap heaven, he needs to see two things clearly. A, that he does not fall down, and B, that he's continuously moving upwards. Since he is literally in his thoughts on the first sky cap, the first heaven, he can therefore progress to the next sky until he rises to the world of angels, Yitzira, and then into the world of throne, which is Bria. And then he'll be able to the world of Atzilus, which is unity, There he shall cleave his mind to the Creator. When he begins the inward journey, he shall envision the image of a man, an image of wild dogs, representing the Klippa that exists in the world of Asiya, needs to be strong and not be afraid. Okay, this is a quote. Okay, what this means is like this. Let's try to make a little bit sense out of this. The idea is to learn to detach your awareness from your body. Okay, but your awareness is in your body constantly, and you feel your body. You have the sensation of your body. You actually detach. So the practice is going to be that you're going to travel in your mind through your awareness into outer space. I don't mean outer space, but into the vast cosmos. The higher you get, and the more expansive the expanse looks, the bigger it looks, the smaller you become. Very, very simple example. Okay, if you're having a conversation with me right now, I see you 6 feet. If I stand a little bit further from you, you look 4 feet. I stand on the top of the roof, you look 2 feet. I go on a plane, you look like smaller, 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 right? So how big are you actually? It's just a matter of perception, right? From the perspective that I'm seeing you right now, from this, this level-eyed view, then you're 6 feet. But if I move in any other direction, all of a sudden you start changing dimensions. So if we could, the same thing also with ourselves. Okay, let's say you're 5'5", whatever your height is. This is your body, okay? You perceive yourself to be in this dimension. The more you're going to detach your consciousness from your body, the more detached you become, so the further you're looking at your body, the more your body shrinks. The more you enter into the vastness, into the cosmos, right? If you imagine yourself, swimming between Mars and Jupiter, in the infinite expanse of the cosmos, you're not even a speck, right? So the further you are, and into the bigger space that you exist, the smaller actually you become. Okay, now ultimately, which is going to be very complicated. Ultimately, you're going to have to let go of all awareness, which is going to be called the level of Atzilut, where you're no longer aware of a self being aware. So your awareness also drops. But you can't actually force that. You can't tell yourself to stop thinking about self. You can only get to a place where you reach the most minuscule form of awareness, that your awareness slowly drops. Now, I'm not saying you're able to do this in a 5-minute setting on a Thursday night class or a Wednesday night class. But the idea is just to get a glimpse of what we're trying to achieve. When we talk about Atzilut, you're talking about a complete drop of self-awareness. But when we're talking about Yetzirah and Bria, these are inner worlds, we're actually talking about there's still awarenesses. So Asiya, there's 4 universes. Asiya is the physical. Physical is when you sense the physical body and all that the material body has, which is your narrative, your story. In the world of Yetzirah, you're sensing only your emotional self. I want to tell you that this is not actually a very high, necessarily spiritual level. A lot of people have this experience in life. Okay, a very simple example. There's music playing. Let's say you enjoy music, or you're a musician, you're listening to music. And the next thing you know, you're dancing. But you weren't aware that you got up to dance. That's because you're now in an emotional universe and your body has less pull. If you're very conscious of your body sitting on this chair and music goes on and you're looking at yourself, you're not going to get up and dance, guaranteed. But if you go and you become completely involved in music and you drop your awareness of the body, the next thing you know, you can actually be dancing. And someone could, shake you, and then you become aware, like, wait a second, I'm actually dancing. Okay, so what this means is that you lose yourself in something that's emotional. The same also with emotions. You can have a very strong, overwhelming sense of love or fear even, that you completely lose your sense of your body. You know, people on extreme situations, if a person is with a lot of people do things that physically they're incapable of doing under normal situations, right? People have lifted cars, I mean, God forbid, in situations where demanded it. But then you can never repeat that action, because if you're aware of your body, you can't do that. So there's certain times that you drop your form. It's like different images of who you are. Like we say, the different pictures of who you're seeing yourself. I'm looking at you, you're 6 feet. I look at you from here, it's another perspective. The same thing also with ourself. From one perspective, we're the physical form, and that's where I'm interacting with you, and that's my body. But I also know that there's a part of me that's my completely emotional self. And sometimes that emotional self completely overwhelms me that I forget actually about my body for those few moments. And then there's a more subtle awareness, that's the world of Bria, of Yetzirah. You're following? So that's the world of emotion. You're entering into that world of emotion. Then there's a higher level, which is the world of Bria, which is the world of intellect, which is more subtle. Because emotion is still self-expressive. If you're feeling joy, it's you that's feeling the joy. I'm feeling joy. I'm feeling love. I'm feeling hurt. I'm feeling pain. I'm feeling love. Right? There's still a me. The subtle dropping of self on an intellectual level, on a mindful level, is when you're completely involved in something that's. Did you drive a car? Some people drive. Yeah. Did you ever sometimes something was completely troubling you, or you were thinking about something, and you have to get from point, or let's say walk down the street. Okay, it takes 10 minutes to walk from here to here. Sometimes you walk out of the house, and next thing you know, the other place. Has it ever happened to you? Okay. It happens. Because if you're so involved in what's going on in your mind, you completely lose track of what's going on in your body. But it's a more subtle dropping, because there's no longer I feeling. Because when you're dancing or you're feeling music, you're still feeling myself. You're just not feeling your body as much. Here, there's completely dropping of self. This is another level of self. These are all multiple levels of who you are at every moment. You're the physical, you're your emotional, and you're intellectual. You're mental. There's your physical self, your emotional self, and your mental self. These are levels of self. Of course, the integrated being is someone that has all levels of self in order and all expressions of one thing. But that's not the topic for tonight. We're just talking about the idea that there are actually different parts of yourself. Just like there are different visions of seeing yourself in different dimensions of your body. So this is what the Baal Shem Tov, this is what he's teaching. He's teaching us, and he's trying to explain how a person divests himself from the material. So the first thing he says is that you're going to encounter klipa. You're going to encounter klipa. What is klipa? Klipa means concealment. Klipa means literally a shell, which means a blockage. Any type of movement you want to take in your life, you're always going to be challenged. And you know what the biggest klipa is? Self-doubt. That's the klipa. That's the most terrible hindrance of any form of growth. That's why Reish is going Amalek. The worst thing is Amalek. Amalek is doubt. What's the most terrible thing? Is doubt. What's doubt? Really? What are you doing? Nah, not you. You can't do anything. Me? I'm a lost case. So anytime you're going to try to do something, now in the Baal Shem Tov's image, it's dogs barking, but whatever, that's a whole other conversation. But that's what the idea of klipa. Klipa is the little, I don't want to say dogs, because today dogs are domesticated, but in those days they were wild dogs. It's like hyenas barking. It's those voices that say, no, and I want to eat you up. So you can't do anything. So the first thing is, he says, there's two important parts of this practice. First of all, is always measure that you're moving further, and always let go of those doubts. There's a place for doubt. There's a place for doubt. Doubt has value, but only in certain places. There's certain parts in life that we have to doubt. Then certain times you can doubt before you start doing it whether it's the right thing to do, but once you make a decision to do it, then you just have to go forward. Otherwise, you never do anything. So the steps are, first you have to always progress forward and always let go of what is holding you back and pulling you back down. in the schematic order of things, he's talking about moving from your physical self into your emotional self, into your mental self, into pure awareness. Okay? Where you completely drop the self that's being aware of the experience. Rab Chaim Vital and the Ari and all the Kabbalists are saying that if you want to have any type of practice, if you want to have any type of spiritual practice, any type of movement in your life, the first fundamental thing to do is you have to learn how to do this. You have to first learn how to detach. Otherwise, you're not going to move anywhere. It's like we gave the example. You're going to constantly pull down and be angry at other people that have not moved forward. Yeah? It's not. It's time?
No, I just want to let you know it's 9 o'clock.
So let's try to do this we're going to do this quickly. Let's just do one meditation, and then we'll take some questions. Just to be very clear, we're going to do this in 5 minutes, but it really takes a lifetime. But it's just a sampling of what we have to achieve to attain any type of real spiritual development. And the idea is we're going to become very much aware on the body, because you have to start with the body. Become very much aware about the story that's connected to your body, whatever that story is. And slowly, this is just a sample, what we're going to try to do is we'll try to bring our awareness a little bit above the head, then a little bit above that, and slowly allow our awareness to watch the body from a bird's eye view, and slowly move into empty space, or into the further and the lighter and the more expansive it becomes, the smaller we become, so the less attached we'll experience it. Okay? It's clear? Mm-hmm. All right. So we do the same thing. If you can just close your eyes for a moment. And if you can just focus your awareness on your toes that are touching the ground, touching the floor. I feel them pressing down on the floor. And then bring your awareness upwards, which means you're completely focusing your attention and your awareness to the lower part of your body, which is sitting on the chair, and you feel yourself pressing against the chair. And awareness is like an airy existence that's floating upwards. And now you're completely focused your awareness on your torso, and on your shoulders, then up your neck, your mouth, around the nose and your eyes, slowly hovering on your forehead, and the crown on top of your head. You have a very clear picture of your image of self, of your body, of the life that your body is leading, of your narrative, of your yes, your existence. Now slowly your awareness is floating upwards. And now you can observe yourself sitting on the chair, looking at yourself down, top down. Your body seems a little bit smaller. And you're floating upwards, like in a cloud of light, a body of light. And your awareness is floating upwards. Just continuously focus your awareness on this body, on this spiritual form. If your mind wanders, let it wander, then go back to this. hovering over the building. It's dark outside and the stars in the sky and you're floating upwards. Now you see the whole city, you see the lights. From a distance you can see the building, you can see yourself sitting there. Everything seems smaller, more trivial, less important. And as you're floating upwards, all this tenacious bond to everything that you are so connected with is being dropped and being shed. You're becoming lighter and quicker. You're starting to move quickly, higher and higher into the vastness of the sky, of the open sky. Now from your mind's view, you can see the entire globe. Everything seems so small from this perspective. And everything seems so large and so vast. Everything around you, the stars, so brilliant. And there's an infinite expanse into all directions. You feel that everything that you lived in your life, all the grudges and everything that you're holding on to, don't matter anymore. You feel yourself like a speck in the vastness of the creation. And you feel the beauty of creation and the praise of the Creator. As you're floating upwards, you're reaching a cap. Seems to be the end. Seems to be reaching the high point of everything that you see. You look downwards, you see this mass expanse. From a tremendous distance, you can see the globe. Then you break open this nightcap. It's like a door, a passageway. And everything is so much more brilliant here. It's so much more vast. You can hear the sounds of the stars and the cosmos, the constellations singing praise. It's an infinite symphony. It's pure beauty. All the externalities has been left go. You feel this tremendous light. You're drawn to this tremendous light. You feel yourself as a being of light. As you reach this point, this recognition that the light is moving downwards, that your awareness has to go all the way down, travel all the way back down through the nightcap into the vast sky. You're like a beam of light, traveling all the way back down into this earth, all the way back down into your body. Take a deep exhale and open your eyes. Okay. So we're going to open it up to questions. And you can't be scared to ask questions. Yeah. If there's no questions, it's not a good sign. Yeah.
So what the process he is describing
Yeah.
going up the levels, and the highest level is when he says that's where the klipa is coming.
No, the klipa is every stage.
So
In other words, anytime you're trying to push forward into a higher level, there's always that klipa that pushes you down and says, you can't move forward. So that's like the guardians of the gate. There's many different imagery of what these klipas represent and how they appear. But this imagery of wild dogs is just imagery. However they appear, it could be a voice, it could be a sound, it could be an image, but it's something that tells you that you can't trespass. This is the highest that you can achieve, and this is the highest level you can go. Yeah. Jeff, do we have any questions from online, or?
I'm asking, I haven't gotten any yet.
All right.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you talk about visualization,
Yeah.
and you're saying, you know, there is the fantasy, and then there is the real,
Right.
the real yourself, your true self,
Yeah.
your soul, your flesh,
Yeah.
everything that is
Right.
a part of you. So, if we have these desires and they're so strong, they're the burning desires,
Mhm.
is that something that is, you know, communicated from a soul level, from divine, or how do you differentiate between
How do you,
fantasy and,
and a real desire?
yeah, and a true level?
So you're talking about a situation where you're uncertain whether this thing is coming from the inside or coming from the outside.
Right.
Okay. So I would say the basic, every desire has in its core is positive. Every desire, in fact, everything in life is positive. What creates negativity is the shell, is the narrative of the story. Let's say, for example, a person is angry, right? Anger in itself is not a negative thing. Anger actually, your heartbeat starts rushing, and you have a certain sensation in the body. So the sensation of anger is not negative. It's the narrative of anger that's negative. So I say, I'm angry at this person, therefore I'm going to do this to the other person. Okay, that's the negative thing, but the actual physical sensation of the body is not negative. So I think in any situation in life, the core of the desire, and it could be for the most silly thing, and we don't have to say what it is. I say, I would like that happen, that thing. But if you ask yourself, why would I like to have that thing? What's the reason for that desire? So I have this desire to get this particular thing because I feel that if I get this particular thing, I will feel X, Y, and Z. And that's usually a positive thing. Let's say it's my confidence or feel good about myself, whatever it is. And I feel like if I get this particular thing, that would make me into. So if we could, first thing is strip the desire from the shell of what it is, and then see if it's still needed or wanted. If you still want it without the shell. So let me try to make this simple. If you say, I would like to get this thing, and this is going to make me have this emotion, which is the emotion that I want to have, and I feel very deeply about having this emotion. If you can strip it from that narrative and say, will I still want it? Even if I don't get that particular thing, do I still want it? If I don't have the narrative, do I still want the emotion?
Yes, if you still want the emotion. But
If you still want the
take a
emotion,
different direction.
right? But if you still want the emotion without the narrative, that's proof that the emotion is correct. Because a lot of times you want something, you say, oh, I would like to have this thing. And then you say, but do I really want it? I don't need it. Oh, I would like to have what's underneath that narrative. I feel like if I have X, Y, and Z, this will make me feel a certain way. So if that's what's really driving me, then I know that the emotion is pure. But if I just let go of this story, let's say a person says, okay, I really want to get a new car. I don't know, if that's your desire. And it's a burning desire, you must have this new car. Say, okay, so why do I need this new car? And if you think about it, you say, okay, could I get away if I think about what I need this new car, if I think about what I really want from this new car, and I still feel like I would like it even if I don't get the new car, because that's the emotion that I really want, then getting the new car is a proper emotion. That's a positive.
It's a proper visualization.
Proper visualization, proper execution of my desire. So let's just make this a little bit more clear. There's certain type of desire. Every desire is pure, but not every desire is meant to be fulfilled. Sometimes a desire is fulfilled. It's the whole idea about releasing sparks, of elevating sparks, which means that you have a connection to this particular thing. Sometimes we release the sparks of something through involvement, and sometimes we release the sparks through disengagement. That's the difference between a positive mitzvah and a negative, right? Something we say, this is a positive thing, we should do this. That's how we're releasing the sparks of this particular food or whatever we're doing through engagement. And sometimes I'm releasing the sparks precisely by not doing it. But I'm going to get the same nourishment through resistance. But I get the exact same nourishment. Sometimes by not doing something, I get the same nourishment like if I would do it. And if I get the same nourishment from not doing it as from doing it, then I know it's actually a correct thing by not doing it or doing it. You're following? Mm-hmm. So you have to really, I can't say it's an easy practice, but you have to really try to do that. Another suggestion, which actually comes to Kedushas Levi from Levi Tzavaditcher, but this is a very interesting suggestion. And it's very simple. What would you tell somebody else in that scenario? Pretend you're trying to give someone else advice for something. Let's say you have a certain issue in your life. You say, I really would like to have this thing. And I really think it's a burning desire and I must have it. Imagine now you detach yourself from your own story. And imagine you're giving advice to a good friend of yours. Would you tell him to pursue it? Because a lot of times it's just our ego. We say, okay, I think this is a very, very strong soul connection that I have with this particular person or this particular thing that I really need to be involved with it. But that's your ego blocking what's the real story. Okay, imagine now you're telling it to a third person. Would you say the same thing?
Right.
So if you can honestly say yes, even if it be not me, I would still tell them to pursue it. Then it's a positive thing. Okay, this is obviously issues that are not clear what is right and what is wrong. These are issues that are in between that we can't really tell.
Right.
I hope that's clarified. Yeah.
What if you're using visualization and it's working
Yeah.
and the things come true?
Yeah.
One, is there a way to make it come faster?
Huh.
And then two,
Yeah.
do you think that you should keep your visualizations to yourself and not share them with others?
You mean the particular imagery that you're having, or? Okay, first of all, the only way to get things faster is obviously you pray and you open yourself up. I think also in praying there's also praying and also surrendering, and these are two parts of prayer that are very important. One is that you ask, and you ask the Creator and ask Hashem. The other one is that you actually surrender, saying, and everything is okay even if I don't get it. And there's a balance between those two things, because when you're surrendering, you're actually making yourself ayin. Ayin means you're making yourself nothing. When you make yourself nothing, you actually become a vessel for everything. Because if you're a full vessel can't receive anything. So you have to actually empty yourself, and emptying yourself is that act of surrendering. So that's also important in terms of telling other people. If it's helpful for you and you can help another person by telling them that, then I would say yes.
I mean, before something manifests, do you
Oh.
believe
It's
in keeping it to yourself?
yeah, it's better to keep it for yourself. And you have other issues that come up. Yeah.
I was wondering, klipa happens at every level, right?
Correct.
So when the reference was to the dogs in the world of Asiya,
Yeah.
is that just because that's the culmination of that meditation? Or is it really that the dogs, those dogs should be present at each new level?
Dogs is a very a lot of ancient cultures. I don't know if you know Egyptian Moby. What's that? There's dogs in the afterlife. There's a lot of dogs is a very famous archetype of like a protector, someone that doesn't let you get. I mean, we have this in the Torah, like the dogs in the Exodus story, like right. Lo yechetz kal we couldn't get out, but the dogs were quiet. But if the dogs weren't quiet, they would like not allow us to leave Egypt. There's idea of dogs. These are metaphors. These are visualizations. They're manifestations of uncertainties and of klipa that appear to us as in our visualization as a dog, but they're not actually. It's not particular to that species. So, in Aramaic, this is a very funny thing, but you know that dogs bark in different languages? Yeah. No, it's a very funny thing, but you know, in America, how do we chant? Ruff, ruff, right? But in other cultures, they have completely different sounds. You know that? Like, you know that. Every country, dogs bark differently. For some bizarre reason. Of course, it's not real, but actually, like the Hungarians chant dog bark is completely strange. It's like, but if you tell in Hungary that Americans say rough rough, they don't understand. It's not dog bark. You ever heard a dog bark? It doesn't say rough rough. It doesn't say hav hav. It doesn't say hoo hoo. It doesn't say, right? It has its own particular sound. But in every language, there's another way that dogs bark. In Aramaic, the dogs bark. They say hav hav. Okay, in Aramaic. Aramaic is the language of the Zohar. So the Zohar, the word hav, hav. I don't know, somehow it sounds like that. But the word have in Aramaic also means give. Gimme, 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 which represents the ego. So that's why the dog is saying have. It's like the Kani Kalvin Tzvachim. It's like these dogs that bark that say gimme, gimme, gimme. It's like the ego. And this is why the dog becomes like an image. But in America, the dogs say bark differently. We'll have to use...
So just one quick follow-up. So
Yeah.
that meditation was not prescriptive as much as...
Correct. But most of it was prescriptive.
Okay.
I think if you were a student of Baal Shem Tov, that in his school, and you were trained learning the Zohar, for you that would be the image of like the dog would be very prominent, especially in the mid Ukraine. There was no domesticated dogs. The dogs were, wild dogs.
Thanks.
Yeah.
How does
Sorry.
all this conjure with free will and destiny?
This is what.
Well, there's the dichotomy between free will that we have something to do with our own.
Oh, and destiny in general.
And destiny.
But that's Jimmy. This is a big question that you can ask in everything. Anytime I'm,
Visualize, right.
But anytime I'm talking to you, do I really have the free choice to give you an answer to this question? So it's, or it's not. Maybe it's destiny.
That's right.
Okay. So you're asking a big question, which is demands a whole other conversation,
Okay.
which is really how these two things work. On on one hand, we say there's free will.
Well, because there are going to be limitations to what we can achieve with visualizations based on whether or not we're.
So wait a second. No. That's another point. That's another point. The point that you're saying that there's going to be limitations to what we can visualize is that's going to be the difference whether it's a real visualization or a fantasy. See, because a fantasy is something that it doesn't come from assessment of who we are.
Well, maybe our assessment is incorrect.
Okay, so that could be that it's a little imperfect imagination.
And maybe it's not in this lifetime; it's in another lifetime.
That's fine. That's part of a conversation. That's a conversation. But the point is that when it's completely fantasy, it's something that's completely like like the image of the snake. It's Adam and Eve. Let's say we're Adam and Eve. We're living our lives, and all of a sudden we're tempted by another voice, an external voice that says, "By the way, you want real happiness? You have to listen to me." Then we know that's the world of fantasy. Everything that's projected in words, well, you say it's complete awareness, and with regards to destiny, I think that's another conversation. But I would say very simply, it's the difference between the yesh, the ayin, and the balance between the two. The yesh is where we have free choice. The ayin is a place of emptiness where everything is absolute. And the yesh and ayin together is a place where the free choice and destiny work together simultaneously, paradoxically in the garden of paradox. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
A person like Baal Shem Tov
Yeah.
that obviously was able to go to the highest level
Yeah.
of it Pashtut, well, would have to have a warm-up through a prayer or something together, or we would be constantly in that state and could enter at will?
I think
don't
it's
know.
as quick as an inhale. I think it's as quick as an inhale. I think it's the Baal Shem Tov. If a person trains himself in this practice, it's just a matter. You go one inhale, you go one inside, and you're into the temple, into the highest of the whole.
Then would a person like that ever choose not to be there?
Sure.
But then it's a choice.
It's a choice that you're making because you're living out in real time.
And you have to live.
And you have to live. So it's about the movement up and down, but you're going inhale and exhale. I mean, inhale is this very, very internal, but you just don't want to live internal because I once gave this very simple example, but it's a very important example. There was a very famous person called Yisrael Salanter, and it was Erev Yom Kippur. So we talked about Yom Kippur. It's like the holiest day, and you're going in the holiest time, and you're preparing, and he's going to synagogue, and he's really prepared in his mindset that he's going to be very, very, inwards. And he meets this guy in the street, and the guy starts talking to him about the Knicks. Do you follow? You know what the Knicks are? Oh, you don't even know what they are. So, basketball, the New York Knicks, Carmelo Anthony, all this shtus. The Knicks, the Celtics.
Yeah.
Okay. What is? Okay, this is obviously didn't happen to Yisrael Salanter. He lived in Europe and there's no Knicks. But imagine you're going to shul and you're really in this right zone. And the funny thing is that this guy starts talking to him about, the difference between the teams and who's going to win. And Yisrael Salanter is like engaging in a conversation. So, whoa, yeah, really? The Knicks are going to win? Oh, that's right. Well. And his student is standing there. And he's completely amazed because this is right before Kol Nidre. It's like the holiest time of the year. And what is he engaged with this guy? And he basically told him when he left him, he said, no, this is what Yom Kippur is about. Yom Kippur is about that if to engage every person on their level. If you're going to go fully into yourself, then this poor man, he was the rabbi of the city. He had nothing to talk to him. What was he going to tell him? The only thing he was able to talk to him was about, a basketball game. But that's the way you made the connection with him. And that's the highest thing in the world. So if you want to retreat and go into the Gan Eden, it's all good, but you have to make sure that you don't lose focus and stay a mensch. Yeah.
So, Rav Pinson said that you detach yourself from emotions to become spiritual. Isn't spirituality an emotion? So you detach from emotions to feel an emotion? It's a bit contradicting.
No, spiritual. Then you detach from your emotional state and all your connections to particular stories and particular grudges and anxieties. You detach yourself from that. And you enter into a pure state, like we said, for example, just like every person knows that in their own life, there are certain times in their life, maybe it's the day that you got married, or under the chuppah, there's a certain time in your life that these small petty things don't matter. That always your life is, this thing bothers me, this person said to me, this person did to me, and you live with all these problems, but there's some little part of you that you know for yourself that there was some time of the year, some place, some time that you were actually in a place that all these things didn't matter. That's what we're talking about. That's detached. I don't want to call the world spiritual. We're talking about it's a detachment from your smallness, your level of asiya.
So many people, they're spiritual, and then different times they go back to their state. So
Correct.
A person could jump up and down.
100%. You don't. It's not like you reach a level and you're there. So a person says, "Okay, I had an experience and I went very deep, and that's it. I've arrived to a place that I'm never going to have another struggle." It doesn't work like that. But the more you have such experiences, the more easily it becomes accessible to get into that place, and the more easily you learn how to detach. So you can be in that place more often and when you need it. But these are states. They're stages, not states.
It's not static.
It's not static. No, that's something else. They're stages, not states. They're stages. They're states, not stages, or stages, not states. But either one. In other words, it's not a place it's not a plateau. Life is a constant. You're moving up a ladder. If you're not moving up, you're moving down. It's not like you arrived at the top of the ladder and that's it. It doesn't work that way. There's continuous movement and continuous movement. Yeah. We're done.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, and have a good night.